was reading an article in the Dallas Morning News on Sunday, and it was about Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot. So when they first met...
I've heard of them.
Yes, good. As you know, you hear these stories, they're like, oh yeah, we bonded at this or that or whatever. So they were locker neighbors at the Combine. Hendershot said, when we first met him, I really didn't like him, talking about Ferguson. He was a super outgoing guy. That's just who he is, how he carries himself. I just remember we'd be in group settings. He'd be the life of the party. I really didn't like that. I was like, who the hell is this guy? Or
because he was the life of the party?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And so
jealousy and envy coming from his enemies.
So they were just kind of different and didn't really get along. However, as they kept moving forward, they started to get along a little bit better, and it started with a drill that they were working on. It was during the broad jump. Ferguson struggled his first couple of attempts, and he needed to hit it big with a third attempt because, of course, we live in a world where if you can't do a good broad jump, you can't possibly play in the NFL. And he said, I turned around, walked towards the group. I was about to do my third jump, and I was like, turn me up. And then Hendershot, kind of pushed him or kind of tried to fire him.
No, that's cool.
Yeah. And so Hendershot said, turn me up, Ferg. Come on, Ferg, turn me up. I started gassing him up a little bit, and then he had a really good jump. And that's when we started to kind of like each other.
That's pretty cool.
And then they both ended up getting, I was going to say drafted by the Cowboys.
Part of the Cowboys.
They both ended up with the Cowboys. And so now I want to push forth the idea. I know I pushed this to Mickey, and he's like, probably too soon to be thinking about this. Those two guys are now friends. You saw a glimpse of what it could look like on Monday night. Is Hendershot and Ferguson excelling going to be one of the keys to move the Cowboys salary cap back into the right direction?
Yes, but man, gosh, it wouldn't be just a Cowboys move to say, no, we're re-signing this guy. Yes, but I don't think you're going to see the level of play that you want to finalize their feeling on that this year. And the reason I say that is because Dalton Schultz is going to see what's happening and go, I need to get back on the field.
Right.
That's going to there was a whisper that going into last week that maybe he was, using an opportunity, and actually the week before using an opportunity. Yeah, last week the opportunity to say, you know what, I don't need to go out there on this franchise tag and injure myself. Maybe I should just go ahead and take it easy on this one and use it as there was a whisper of that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that this what'll happen is once he realizes, the Cowboys are doing just fine without me, he'll be back on the field as quickly as possible. And coaching staff and owner aren't going to say, hey, don't let that guy play because we have the future at our hands. They're going to say, no, we have $12 million that we got out on the field. We need to go ahead and use it. So whatever he needs to get out there and play for his money instead of, hey, let's go ahead and use this opportunity to let these young rookies go do something special.
And so some people will bring up, do they have salary cap problems? They had the second most salary cap space, blah, blah, blah. Now they have the sixth most salary cap space this year. But look ahead to next year. They have $15 million of salary cap space.
Which you have to spend all of that.
You do not.
At the beginning of the season.
But
for training camp.
That's right. Which I need to have a side conversation with him to know more about that. But that's 20th in the league. Now, can you make arguments that, of course, starting with Dak, there are contract switches that can be flipped and everything like that to help create some more money? Sure. But right now, you're 20th in the league in salary cap space next year already. You have $15 million in space. Compare that to the Bears, who have $115 million. That's a real number. Look it up. So you don't want Dalton Schultz back, is what we've heard from a lot of the fans, because you already franchise tagged him this year. And what I very much fear is that they're going to look at the contracts that have been handed out and say, you know what, let's give him about a 4-year, $52 million deal. But guess what? We'll backload the deal. And so the number will be so low next year. And we're geniuses and we're saving money. That's why we got Dalton Schultz. Or Hendershot and Ferguson can continue to do what they've been doing, especially on the blocking front, and maybe make you realize that you do not need Dalton Schultz, and he's a good player, but somebody else can have him, and you can move on down the road. This past weekend, for example, I guess it was Monday night, Hendershot and Ferguson combined for 5 catches, 56 yards.
Can we start calling him Ferg-Shot, though?
Yes, I think we should.
I really like that
All
name.
right, so Ferg-Shot combined 5 catches, 56 yards. And I was reading something from David Hellman, and he talked about how well they did blocking.
Yep.
Which is something that people lament about Dalton Schultz all of the time. So I understand your point 100%, Corey, about you might not see enough this year to be like, those are my 2 guys. I'm kind of hoping that we can get to that point. I don't wish injury on Dalton Schultz or anything because he's a good player, but I wouldn't hate it if he was out again this week and those 2 guys showed up again.
When you franchise tag a guy, you can't trade him. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
Because I was just thinking.
At least at this point in the season, I don't think that is possible.
I was just thinking, and I just can't remember the rules when you franchise tag a guy, if you can or can't trade him, because
there is a time you can. I think we might have passed that time.
Okay, because I would love to at this point. I know the Cowboys don't think this way. It's too hard to work for them. Is if you know you're not going to franchise tag them again, or you're starting to feel confident about the 2 other guys, I know it would hurt you in depth, but how much could it help you in the future? Is if a team that is, I'll throw out Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay should go for it. I just can't believe Tampa Bay didn't go out and do whatever they could to get Jason Peters.
Right.
You have a quarterback who is the greatest of all time, who's not the greatest in the sport today, but still really good, and you have a chance to win it all. Once Tom Brady retires, which most likely I think will be after this year, you're in a 3-year rebuild situation till you find a really good quarterback. And could you, if the rules say you can't, then I'm totally off on this, just fun point. Could you trade your tight end that you don't have plans for in the future and get like a 2nd-round pick from Tampa Bay so it helps you later?
And the flip side, somebody suggested from the 806, he's going to leave, get him on the field so he can increase his value and bring back a better comp pick. The issue that I have with that is if Dalton Schultz is back on the field and doing his thing and stuff, that will drop the usage rate of what we've now coined Ferg-Shot. And so that will drop their usage rate, which makes it far less likely that you'd be like, those guys can handle it. And I worry that the Cowboys would get in a bidding war over Schultz, which is not what I want to see.
And the reason I say 2nd-round pick is you can't get higher than that. So when they talk about comp picks, I can't get higher than after the 2nd round is over. So that's why I would tell Tampa, hey, you're probably going to pick somewhere between 20 and 32. We want your 2nd-round pick because we would love to have a pick that's probably going to be 30 to 40 picks higher than the comp pick we get back. And remember, now the Cowboys don't do this, so they don't have to worry about it. If you go sign a pretty decent free agent, you lose the comp pick from losing a pretty good free agent, but the Cowboys don't seem to really do that, so they do get most of their comp picks.
I want to toss this to cut 6 in just a second, Brian Baldinger, and you might have already heard this cut, but I found some interesting numbers to back this up. Is the Cowboys had 62 plays on Monday night. 44% of those plays came with an extra tight end on the field. So
not just one tight end, but
exactly,
2.
Exactly. Right. So you're talking about your newly dubbed combination of Ferg-Shot out there on 44% of the plays. And I feel like we thought the offense did fairly well on Monday night. I realize the 23 points does not seem like an eye-popping number. You're also using a backup quarterback. You also had 2 huge drop passes that we think could have inflated the score by, at the very least, 7 more points. So we're talking about potentially 30 points. I realize that didn't happen, but I was intrigued by the formations they ran, and so was Brian Baldinger on cut 6 right here.
Steve, I'll start this off by saying there's not a quarterback controversy.
No,
however,
there is not.
The Cowboys do put a game plan together different with Cooper Rush at quarterback than they do with Dak Prescott. And he's attempted 62 passes, Andrew and Steve, in the last 2 wins, 4th quarter comebacks, all that. He's been sacked once. Last night I saw a lot of YY formations. Both tight ends blocked very well. Jake Ferguson along with Peyton Hendershot. They both contributed a great deal. A lot of play action, a lot of max protection, a lot of half-field reads. And the fact is, they said, we're not going to let this guy get hit. We're not going to allow Cooper Rush to be affected early in games where he starts to be a little shy about keeping his eyes down the field. And I do think there's something to glean from the way that they have protected Cooper Rush going forward when Dak does come back.
All right.
By the way, Dak is throwing some short passes at practice today,
which Mickey started to tell us
according to my
he
sources.
could shake hands. And I do agree with that last point about maybe using more of this kind of protection or these shortened field options in certain instances with Dak. But the point was, there's another person right there who talked about the blocking ability of these two guys. So if they are better blockers than Schultz, which I feel like now we're pretty early, but potentially we all agree on, and they can put up decent numbers, I'm hoping that the Cowboys can look at that combination and say, we will move forward with these young players who cost little to no money against our cap versus Dalton Schultz, who's going to cost you $13 million. And it all started with them kind of pushing and firing each other up at the combine after they originally didn't like each other. And I just think that's a cool story.
I got two things I want to get into here. Let's just say that some point in the season, maybe one of your receivers is injured, or you are actually in position to make another bold move to put you maybe over the top of with talent. And Steven actually does go get Odell Beckham Jr. and brings him in, and they're like, look, we're going to go make a run for the Super Bowl. Like, this is, we're going to add talent to this roster. And you got all these things going on too. And somebody did say that you can trade, but not before they sign the tender or back. So you can trade them now, but not then. And so if that's the case, like, let's see all these things work out. Are you still killing Steven for saving the money? That's a question I've been kind of, will Steven be able to go, see, I had the money for just the right moment. And this is the player that we think is that close to putting us over the top for this run. I'm
not for that instance.
He's getting killed now for it.
I know,
because there's no move that's happened.
What bothers me though is when you hear Steven or Jerry say we're always open for business with Dak. That terrifies me because I'm telling you now, believe me when it happens. They view that contract for Dak and know that it has not even kicked in yet. Like, if you're like, he makes $40 million a year. Not against the cap, he doesn't. He makes $19 million against the cap. Next year, it's $49 million. The Cowboys' way around that is, if we extend you out now, we can flatten out that money with a signing bonus and everything like that. I'm afraid that is the same logic they'll use with him. That's the same logic they'll use with Dalton Schultz. And they're like, yeah, but really we're saving money. It's the logic you used a long time ago, Corey, when you're like, your wife would come in and say, I saved 50%. You're like, 50% of what? That's what I'm afraid.
Like, don't worry about that.
Yeah, I'm afraid the Cowboys will announce like a 3-year extension to Dak Prescott. And now they're like, his salary cap number next year, $29 million. We just saved you $20 million. And you're like, but hold on.
Yeah.
But now we have him for 3 more years. Are we sure that was the best idea? I fear the same thing with Dalton Schultz.
The other point that I wanted to get to is Ferg-Shot. Definitely, somebody said it sounds like a drink of some sort. We definitely need one of the bars that we rock with to create the Ferg-Shot.
Sure.
And every time that they get a catch or a touchdown or something, we all take Ferg-Shot. Yeah, I like this idea a lot. Also at practice today, Charles Haley spending a lot of time with Micah Parsons, giving some advice on pass rush techniques.
I like the idea that there are assets available to him to be like, hey, I know you're really good, but what if we made you even better than really good? I hope Charles Haley's in his ears be like, yeah, you notice you didn't win Defensive Player of the Month. Huh? So you can just, like, I would love that.
Too, Kevin.
I know. I would love that. Absolutely.